So our first meeting since, I guess, June. Obviously, we take the summers off, but everyone enjoy getting out into the air for a change. But we're excited to be back. Glad to see everyone. And well, here we go. Next slide, Dave. So here's our board members. So yeah, we'll just go past that really quickly.
Little lag. I clicked enough and happened.
So here's our board members. So from the top left, that's Larry Bach. Larry's our man in Texas. So he's got the Western region for Agile Hartford. And then locally, we have Janet Custer, Vin Sukraj, Dave Chersnowski, and myself, Steve Nunziata.
Blue tapes in those pictures still, Vin.
See, that's all.
Just saying, consistent. You're consistent, brother. That's good.
So as always, we welcome your feedback. So you'll be getting a brief survey email after the meeting tonight. What I'll also do is include a link to the October meeting, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well. We're actually switching away from, Janet, where do we switch away from? SurveyMonkey.
SurveyMonkey to Survio.
To Survio, okay. So it'll look a little different. You guys have taken it before, but the questions are still pretty much the same. But let us know what we can do. We're always planning our next event, so your feedback is very valuable to us. So look for that coming out around 7:15 tonight. So how to find us, there's our Gmail address. You can always reach us at agilehartford@gmail.com. And Vin takes care of our social media. So we're on Twitter, we're on the Gram, and we're on LinkedIn. You can find us the Agile Hartford group on LinkedIn. Reach us through any of those channels. So tonight's sponsor, I want to sincerely thank Eliason Group again. So Rich Thompson, Diane Hiller, thank you for your continued support. Rich, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, thanks, Steve, and thanks to everybody on the Agile Hartford board, Dave, Vin, Larry, Janet, and I think I got everybody there, right? But just, appreciate the partnership that we've had, the past 5+ years, and it's been great, to keep everybody in the community here together virtually, during this virtual time that we're in. So you see some familiar faces on the line here, but for anybody new that might not know about us, so we're a strategic consulting and talent solutions partner. We have expertise throughout the Agile transformation, so we provide advisory, coaching, training services, as well as team level resources. So if you're an Agilist looking for opportunities, or if your company's going through a transformation and might be interested in learning more about our services, definitely reach out. We've got Diane Hiller on the line too here, one of our senior recruiters who's very much tied to our Agile community here locally. So if you're an Agilist, definitely send Diane a note, and she can reach out to you. So, but thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it. And Ronica, welcome to Agile Hartford as well.
Thanks, Rich.
Yep.
So what's next? So the October meeting is live right now. So we're having a couple of folks from Slalom join us, Vicki Kalis and Dan Gallagher, and their presentation, Stop Building the Wrong Things Faster. I can tell you as an Agile coach, I see that happening a lot. So I know this is going to be a great presentation. November right now is a little bit up in the air. We're kind of shifting a little bit. We actually had Al Shalloway from PMI slated to join us. Al has left PMI. So that kind of threw that into a little bit of turmoil, but we're working to secure a speaker for November. So we will have a November event. More detail, certainly by the time we have our October meeting. And then for December, here comes the privileged information. We're going to City Steam in Hartford in person.
Oh, great.
In person.
Yeah. And we will have a limited guest list. So you guys are all in the family, so you'll know about it first. But we're excited to have that. So we'll have a speaker from Eliason Group. I think it may be Steve Grosstock or Bob Ellis, but we're working that all out right now. But nonetheless, we're absolutely planning an in-person event downtown Hartford at City Steam with all the cool people, which are you guys. So look for that. Next slide. So this evening's presenter. So there we go. Please help me welcome RonicaRoth. Ronica is the co-founder and principal of Elevate.2. And Ronica, I'll turn it over to you to do a little more in-depth introduction and your presentation, modeling change through everyday practice. So please help me virtually welcome RonicaRoth.
Yay. Thank you. All right. Yay. Thank you very much. Give me one moment here as I share my screen and then rearrange my windows so that, of course, I can see more of you guys because that's way more fun. I will do that. And I'm not going to try to talk and do that at the same time. I'll just make sure I could see you, get everything arranged. Okay. Excellent. Thanks, guys. I'm really excited. I have to say, so I'm happy for you guys that you get to be in person in December. And I'm really grateful for the opportunities that being remote provides, that I get to talk to Agile Hartford. That's super cool. I've definitely spent some time in Hartford at some of the famous companies there that have done Agile. Not to mention the fact that I went to college in Western Massachusetts. So drove through Hartford every time I went to school. Went to Mount Holyoke College. And thank you, Janet, for inviting me to be here. I really appreciate it. I will say just a little bit more about me. I like to start with my belief statement, right? I love watching people thrive and achieve together. And I believe that organizations of all types can elevate how people work together. And that to unleash the potential of individuals and teams. I get really jazzed about teams. My sports are team sports and my business is a team business in my mind. And it's super fun. And so that is what I get to do every day, which is amazing. And Elevate does even more of that. So for folks who know Eric Willicke and or Christine Hudson, we started Elevate so that we could bring not only the practices and mindset, but the culture of agility to all kinds of organizations. So we work with everyone from early growth stage to the Fortune 100 or Fortune 10 even. And that's specifically for Janet there. And I'm going to tell you right now that, actually, I'll open the chat. I might not follow the chat very well, but I'll have it somewhere on here. You guys can get my attention if you need to. Okay, cool. But yes, and I appreciate you giving me a chance to come here and play with some ideas with you. So let me start. I want to invite you to think of a previous mentor, a business role model, someone whose words and behaviors you watched and tried to adopt. And I'll ask people to go on mute. All right. For me, my most powerful superhero role model in terms of how I spoke and behaved was Jean Tabeka. Jean was Rally's first Agile, Rally Software's first Agile coach. I was at Rally for 12 years. And she was a huge influence on the whole company's culture. She showed me every day the way words and actions can set a tone and can create a space that others can enter into with ideas and creativity. I think of the way she would slow down a meeting when things got a little especially just an informal meeting, but people would start being all over the place. And that's a state, by the way, that benefits someone like me who's super outgoing, right? And she'd be like, can we check in with our purpose? And then she'd pick up a whiteboard marker to capture the purpose. Right. Then she would hand out stickies and pens that were from the pile in the center of every meeting table. Can we get everyone writing down ideas? And I learned from talking with her, at other times, that she was actually one of those quiet thinkers who struggles to contribute when the loud ones take over. So she slowed everything down to make space for herself, but also to make space for everyone. Here's another more verbal example. She was always careful in a work conversation to use yes and instead of yes but. You guys have probably done that, right? You know how it is. You're in a debate, a discussion, and someone makes a point and you're like, you're right about pickles, but, and we all know what that means. Anything before the but can be ignored. Jean relentlessly and without fail would say yes and. You're right about pickles, and the sandwich is only good if it's dill pickles. Right? It was such a simple practice that made a huge difference. It changed the tenor of every discussion she was in. Discussions with Jean tended toward the passionate, but never mean never with dug-in positions. They bent toward the collaborative because of her words and actions. And I worked really hard to do the same. I want to suggest to, there we go. I want to suggest to you that leaders at all levels can accelerate lean agile change and lean agile culture by consciously modeling a more facilitative leadership style in words and actions every day. And I want to invite you to practice facilitative leadership, to facilitate systems learning, to facilitate empowerment, and to facilitate inclusion. The result will be that you can help create sustaining lean agile change and lean agile culture. You will also help with succession planning and with having happier, more engaged employees and colleagues. You will help make everyone better around you. You will help make everyone around you better and help them make better, more informed decisions. You will tap the brilliance of the people around you and help everyone collaborate better. Sorry, I was just trying to change something. Well, I can't do it. All right, never mind. Keep going. There we go. So for the rest of this hour, or however long it is, I can't remember, for the rest of our time, I want to talk to you about the first why of facilitative leadership, the benefits that it brings. Then we're going to talk about the how, the specific language and behavior practices of a facilitative leader. And then just when it might seem like a little bit too much to take on, I want to talk to you about how to take very specific and very small steps, earning repeated small wins in order to make your own journey to become a facilitative leader. So that's what we're going to do. So the big why for facilitative leadership ultimately is better, improved business outcomes and happier humans. This is what we've seen time and time again as facilitative leaders create an environment in which people are aligned and motivated, contributing and working together toward the larger purpose. My business partner, Christine Hudson, and I are even writing a book to capture the results we've seen about it. We're that passionate about it. When I think of the dynamic of facilitative leadership, I think about Jim Collins. Rally famously read books constantly. One of the books we read was Good to Great. And he talks about how level 5 leaders tend to give all the credit for success and take all the blame for challenges. And so when their teams did well, the leaders said they did it. Right. And that's kind of, and the people said, we did it. Right. And that's exactly what we're trying to create here, is that sense. One way we get better business results is by helping more of the people around us understand how value is created, how value flows, and how value is consumed by both internal and external customers. So often our colleagues, our employees are myopic. They're focused on their own team or their own little part of the system. And in that case, we tend to make sub-optimized decisions. However, when more people understand the big picture, then they can make decisions that take the whole system into account. When everyone understands the intertwined purpose hierarchy throughout the organization, then everyone can make better decisions. Then we can actually decentralize decision-making, which helps us go faster with better results, which is definitely one of the key tenets of Agile, right? What we're trying to do. A lot of companies find hard to do. We create happier humans in part by facilitating teams to become high performing, right? So research and experience tells us some of the characteristics of high performing teams, right? And one is that everyone feels included, a member of the group, able to show up as their authentic selves. People can feel appreciated for their skills because we explicitly talk about those skills, perhaps by co-creating team charters in which we capture the skills that people bring to bear. And then as a team, we're constantly leaning on those skills in order to get the job done, right? High-performing teams tend to understand their team's purpose and understand the connected purposes for all the teams in their ecosystem, and then the purpose of the whole system. Right. So again, going back to that systems view, it's not just about me and my team, but all the teams. It's about understanding the teams I give work to, the teams I take work from, and regularly connecting the purpose of the whole system and not losing sight of that. If we don't lose sight of that, and the reason we don't lose sight of that, excuse me, is because a facilitative leader makes it really easy to see, bringing it front and center all the time. Equal share of voice is particularly important. In Leadership is Language, one of my favorite books these days. David Marquet writes about the critical importance of equal share of voice in a team's ability to speak openly, consider all options, and make better decisions. Similarly, Google famously researched what made the strongest teams, expecting to find factors around, certain kinds of skills or certain discipline or certain level of experience or maybe individual team member characteristics like introverts versus extroverts. And of course, to their surprise, the research showed that the best teams had only 2 factors in common. And one was that everyone on the team overall got roughly equal talk time. They called it equality in distribution of conversational turn taking. And it's what Marquet calls equal share of voice, right? And then the other was good social sensitivity, right? So they paid attention to what each other was thinking and feeling. And I believe the intersection of these 2 things is psychological safety. And I love this definition of psychological safety from Timothy Clark. He wrote the 4 stages of psychological safety of the 4 stages of psychological safety framework. And he defined it as a condition in which human beings feel included, safe to learn, safe to contribute, and safe to challenge the status quo, all without fear of being embarrassed, marginalized, or punished in some way. I think that's a great definition. And psychological safety can explicitly be nurtured by facilitative leadership, right? And that's because facilitative leaders make it easy for the team to make members feel included and safe by promoting and protecting team working agreements. Right? Many of you Scrum Masters out there do that. I hope do that every day. They normalize failure, which in turn normalizes learning. Right? They facilitate team conversations and meetings with an eye towards equal talk time and making sure we hear from everybody. Right? Any facilitative leader can do those things. You don't need that to be your job, right? And just to be super explicit, I know good social sensitivity might sound like people who are naturally social or naturally empathetic. And it's not necessarily that. It's really about a nurtured safety to be allowed to pay attention to how people feel. It turns out paying attention to how people feel is just a human thing, but we learn to not do it at work, right? Because we're busy not showing our emotions, and so we can't ask people about theirs, right? So as we get into things like team norms, one team norm might be to have personal check-ins at the beginning of team meetings, or just having a norm where it's okay to say how we're feeling. And maybe we even make it fun, right? Would anyone like to bring in an F-bomb, an F word here? F-bomb, that's not what I meant. An F word, right? A feeling word. And there's strong research emerging that indicates that allowing emotions at work support both happiness and performance. I'm not sure why that needs to be researched, but that's fine. It's fine. Another benefit of facilitative leadership, right? We're still on the why here, is that we get to a more sustaining lean agile change or a lean agile culture, right? So people feel the principles and carry the mindset rather than living in the space of we have to do things in a certain way and follow certain rules, right? It's practice, stand-ups for collaboration and transparency, collaborative planning, blah, blah, blah. But it's also deliberate practice, meaning we talk about what we're trying to create. We talk about the principles behind the actions. We get feedback on how well we're exhibiting the intent behind the practice. I think about that a lot because I was part of the probably early crew of Agilists who was just like, if we just get people doing the practices, then the principles will follow automatically. And I hate to say it, but I learned that wasn't true. We needed to explicitly state the why and trust that people can hear it and do something with it, right? So how do you bring about these benefits? And yes, I will share the slides. So how do you bring about these benefits? It starts with the mindset, belief in others, what can happen if we mobilize the system, right? So I look at this quote, my team is amazing. Our whole train is amazing. If we could mobilize this crew, imagine what we could accomplish. And that may sound a little Pollyanna to you. Maybe as someone who is constantly helping your team improve, you're far too aware of their shortcomings or the challenges in the system. But here's my story. So I used to, once upon a time when I was young, I used to think I was the smartest person in the room often. And as a result, I tended to speak first. I tended to overtalk others. I was impatient because I usually knew the end of their sentence and I couldn't wait for them to say it out loud, right? But at some point I was given rather gentle but firm advice that I was being a jerk and that I should change my behavior. So I worked on making space for others. I found ways to wait to talk and how to stop interrupting. And I can talk more later about how I did that. But when I did it, the most extraordinary thing happened. I discovered that my colleagues were pretty darn smart. I was wrong about how some of those sentences were going to end. And by waiting, I heard and learned all kinds of things I'd been missing. I learned how quiet, thoughtful Ben was likely to bring in data from left field to turn a problem on its head. Right? I learned that Ken brought solutions I would never imagine. And I learned that almost everyone around me had something to offer at least some of the time. And so my mindset changed slowly, right? And now I am looking for what special thing each person brings. And I really do believe that this team is amazing, right? And not just because they're my team, because they're just amazing on their own, right? So even before you adopt that mindset that everyone's amazing and I just have to figure out how to make space for them, you can still begin to practice facilitative leadership. And as you do that, I want you to notice how your team reacts and notice what effect it has on your thoughts and feelings about them. So let's start talking about what some of those practices are. And what's more of kind of what I mean by facilitative leadership and how do you do it? So there really are specific behaviors and words that you can practice which help facilitate systems thinking, empowerment, and inclusion. And this list on the screen is by no means exhaustive, but we're going to go over some of them explicitly. I was giving you a chance to look at them. So start by saying this statement to yourself. I am the kind of person who values better business outcomes for my company. Therefore, I want to establish a presence of positive intent and engaged energy directed towards outcomes. I want to hear about the elephants, and I want to make space for the hard conversations. So let's start with presence. So facilitative leadership starts with your stance, your presence. This will often look like your presence in a meeting, since that's where so much of business happens and even development oddly happens there, right? But it also can include one-on-one conversations and informal interactions. So the goal is this presence that I call positive intent and engaged energy directed toward an outcome. And don't worry, it doesn't mean you have to be happy all the time or even ever. What I do mean is that you constantly remind people what outcome we're aiming for. You help provide, encourage, and support a sense of forward progress. And you hold and represent a genuine belief that the outcome is beneficial. Or that if that comes into question, you help the team gain the information and context, including systems context, to adjust, right? So that might look like, you help the team appreciate the small wins and the things that humans are already doing to get us there. Right? You might help the team find resiliency to keep going and improving in the face of challenges. Right? This presence is a decision to lead with an idea that we together have what it takes to get to that outcome. And then you connect with people with empathy in terms of helping them see that, right? And so this is sort of a concept of like positivity as a skill, right? And again, the skill is not to be relentlessly happy, nor to be inauthentic, right? It's to help people find the path forward and have that as kind of your mission, right? I think about a time not so long ago when I was involved in an acquisition. I was not excited about it. I was actually pretty bummed that we had been bought by that company, or any company, but that company. But at the end of the day, I was a senior leader in my group and in my company. We were all trying to get through it. And I could decide that I was frustrated or unhappy, or that I was mad that things went out of my control, or I could lead my people through it and help them see what was possible and help them see what we could create together. And surprise, surprise, that's what I did. And that turned out to be awesome. And I never pretended I was ecstatic, but I certainly went looking for positive outcomes that were possible. And then I tried to nurture and find and convey a sense of our ability to create those best outcomes. Yeah. And so, and also that, by the way, that also meant that I could also like express that, you know, today I'm super bummed again and that we got bought, but I'm still trying to find our path through to the great outcomes. There's still goodness here, right? So that's what I mean by establishing presence. So I'm just gonna give you a moment to think about what that might feel like. Right, so I need to think for just a moment what it might look like, say, walking into your next planning meeting or stand up or sprint retrospective, right? How might you establish a presence of positive intent and engaged energy directed toward an outcome? What would that look like in a way that was authentically you? If you have some cool ideas about that, I'd love for you to jot those down and maybe even throw them into the chat and share it with each other. What might be something you would do that would tell yourself that you are establishing a presence of positive intent and engaged energy? Yep, listen first. Inside jokes can help. And it's that intentionality around, I'm not avoiding conflict, but I'm going to loosen the tension so we can keep going, right? That's that directed energy. We're stuck here. Let's figure out how to move forward. Yeah. And some of this literally stance, by the way. I remember a bunch of us at Rally, including Gene and I think at the same time took a Decker communications class. And one of the things they teach you is to stand on the balls of your feet when you're in the front of the room, whether you're facilitating and so you're sort of literally kind of having a little energy and that's palatable. Putting a dog on camera, I like that. Cool. Awesome. All right. Yeah, break the tension. Exactly. So the next facilitative leadership practice that we're going to talk about today that helps you become the kind of person who values better business results is okay, this is perfect because you guys have been talking about breaking the tension. It's about wanting to talk about the elephants. So the phrase, the elephant in the room, this is, of course, Banksy's installation of said name, right, of people ignoring the elephant in the room, refers to, the phrase refers, of course, to a question, a solution, or a controversial issue that's obvious to everyone, but which is deliberately ignored because to do otherwise would cause embarrassment or sadness or arguments, or maybe it's simply taboo. The facilitative leader welcomes elephants, makes it easy to name them, put them front and center in the middle of any given meeting or discussion, because it's critical to creating real understanding and effective alignment and outcomes. So can you imagine even doing a brainstorming or a root cause analysis while ignoring the elephants? right? When you ignore the elephants in the room, you create superficial results, which who wants that? That's not helpful, right? So to be able to bring the elephants in the room requires a certain commitment to do so, a bit of courage, and building skills around conflict resolution. But it starts with practice. And in the beginning, it looks a lot like naming the elephant and kind of laughing about it and seeing what happens. So you guys were just talking about bringing humor, directed at the problem, right? Which is what Mike wrote in the chat, which is perfect. It's exactly that. So sometimes that's all you do. You don't really know what's going to happen next, but you just kind of, let's just see what happens. Whoops. Oh no, that's right. Then when you hear the worst of the elephants, you need to prepare yourself for that moment. And that's where knowledge of and practice with the responsibility process can come in handy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. I know Ken is, because we've talked about it. So this model comes from my good friend, Christopher Avery, who has studied both sociology and organizational communication. And the model describes the series of mental states that we go through when things go wrong. And the important thing about the model is that these are perfectly natural mental states that we walk through. The goal isn't to stop experiencing the states that are below the line of responsibility, but rather to just get better and faster at recognizing when you're stuck in one of these sort of lower states and help yourself get up to that state of responsibility. So let me give you a quick overview of the process. So in the beginning, we don't even know we have a problem. We're in denial. Right. So I'm going to get this is my favorite example is, so let's say you're trying to get out of the house. You're late for a meeting as usual. And then you can't find your keys. And the first thing you say is, who took my keys? Even though you live alone. Right. So you're laying blame. And then we often quickly move to kind of justify, I'm such a, how could I always do this? Justify. How could anyone find their keys in a mess like this? This place is ridiculous. It's chaotic, right? Which both of those states are kind of, I'm blaming external factors. I don't have any control. I'm blaming other things but then we can move to shame and be like, I'm such a dummy. I always do this. I'm always late. And I never put my keys where they go. And that's why I can never find them. And the problem with shame is some people think that's a fine state to be in. But we've given away all our power here. There's no like impetus to action. This is often where a lot of us get stuck, right? And we sort of give up. We might get to obligation where we say, I really ought to hang a hook. Really ought to hang a hook. I really ought to hang a hook and by the door and have my keys there. And that would be better. The problem with that is when you're in obligation, Christopher calls it the state of have to, don't want to. And so lacking that internal motivation, we'll do anything but on a Saturday, we'll do anything but hang a hook on the wall. And ideally we get all the way to a state of responsibility where we just kind of own our response to the situation. And again, the key to this model is that all the below the line states are ultimately states of powerlessness. Like I said, in justify and lay blame, we believe external forces have all the power. And it's just like when you look at your company and something doesn't go the way and you're like, well, that's just how things are around here. Semicolon, there's nothing I can do about it. Right? It's a powerless state. Shame and obligation are equally powerless, but internal states. It's I'm not good enough, or I'm at the mercy of the needs of others. I should have that meeting with my boss, right? And again, in those states, we're still not going to do it because we're not full of our own agency. We're just aware of our own weakness and miring ourselves in our own weakness. Only when we can own our response can we act from a place of responsibility, a place where we can own our choices. It changed my life when I learned this from Christopher. I would really like to go to dinner with you, but I'm choosing to go to work because in the long run, I'll be less stressed if I meet this deadline and I can enjoy dinner much better another time. Right. So not, I I wish I could go to dinner with you. I really do, Janet, but I have to work. Not in my control, right? What kind of place is that to be versus I'm choosing, I'm making a choice, right? And owning my choice. So one thing Christopher taught me is that when you notice you're putting something off, like an application, a meeting, a report, when you examine, you'll often find you're stuck in obligation or shame and justify about it. Once you see, like everything, once you see it, you can work past it, right? So thinking of that, I would love for you to take a moment of silent reflection. Think about a recent time when you got stuck in one of these below the line mindsets with a colleague, or with your partner or family. Right. So a time when you got stuck in blaming or justifying or shame or obligation. And so I just want to invite you to consider how thinking about this model might, just noticing that feeling and thinking about this model might affect your interactions with people and what it might be like if you simply tried to name where you are in the process more often, right? You don't even have to fix it yet. And it doesn't have to be right now in the moment. It could be like, oh man, in that meeting, I was like justify all over. I was just running around blaming everyone but myself. Fascinating. I wonder why I did that. Right? You could just stay right. Fascinating. When I took Christopher's leadership gift program, he told us we got to count it as a win just noticing when we were stuck. So we'd open every call with wins. And one of the wins was, I was stuck in obligation last week. Win. I know, seems a little lame, but it turns out it works, right? I feel like I wanted to say one more thing about that before I moved on. What I just want to come back to, sorry, I just want to tie it because I told that in a very long way, and I want to tie it back to where we were with the elephants, right? So again, I'm going to bring this elephant in the room, or I'm going to, as a facilitative leader, encourage people to bring elephants into the room. And now I've got to kind of get better at noticing when it's sending me into a state, right? And it's a little, it's like facilitators want to know when you have to notice when you're triggered. Like, whoa, that's really sending me to especially those external states, right? Or, wow, that's really sending me into shame. It's going to make it hard for me to show up well, right? And again, as you get practice just naming it, then you can get practice that helps you get to the part where you move out of it, right? Because if you're going to go making people talk about hard things, it helps if you can kind of feel like you're in a solid place, right? And just owning your response. Owning your response can also look like, wow, that elephant makes me super uncomfortable too, just like it's making you uncomfortable. But when I'm in a place of responsibility, I can say that without a lot of charged language, right? So that's what we're trying to get to. Also, I'm trying to get Google to change my, okay, great. All right, next. So, I am the kind of person who empowers others. So one way, I'm the kind of person who empowers others by making space for them. And making space for them includes asking powerful questions, using the power of silence and listening. So this next piece of facilitative leadership is I just said that. Sorry. Lost my mind. Listening intently, because I want to say these words, intently and intentionally. And so we're going to talk about all those things. So asking powerful questions. So once you've established presence, welcomed the elephants, centered yourself in personal responsibility, meaning you've stopped freaking out on the inside, and you've decided that you would very much like to learn more about the elephants, then you can ask some powerful questions. And powerful questions are first and foremost open-ended, right? Not binary yes, no. They invite more conversation. They invite more story. The question itself is short, which reduces the emphasis on you and puts the emphasis on the respondent. More important, powerful questions often require deeper thought about kind of meaning and value, right? So, you're asking a powerful question rather than a rhetorical question or a leading question when you don't know the answer to the powerful question, right? When you go to ask your team something and you're not waiting to tell what you think the answer is or hoping that they'll say what you're thinking, right? It's not a powerful question if it's a trick question, right? That they can get wrong, right? So when you're truly curious, you might be asking a powerful question. And then the hard part is you have to be quiet after you ask the question. This is not always comfortable. The free exchange of ideas, concerns, or questions is routinely hindered by interpersonal fear far more often than most managers realize. I had a really great boss at one point, and yet he would be like, "This is a safe space. Any questions? Okay, great. No, great. Let's go." Right? He didn't mean to, but he just kept talking. Nobody could ask any questions, and it was just nervousness, really. Right? It's uncomfortable. So what you need to do instead is ask that powerful question and then stop talking. And that's how you give space to others. Right? And so imagine the steps to talking, especially on a Zoom call. I'm a participant in a meeting and I'm listening intently, or because I'm engaged, or at least I'm polite. And I have a thought. Should I contribute? Yes, my thought is good enough to contribute. Oh, let me make sure others have a chance. Let me make sure I give others a chance to go first, because that's what my mama taught me. All right. Oh, okay. It's my turn. Let me find the mute button. Let me find the other mute button. And now I'm going to use my voice. That's a lot of steps. And that's why good facilitators and facilitative leaders count to at least 7 after they ask a question or invite participation. At least 7. Right. And I don't usually have to count to myself anymore. But it was interesting when everything moved to Zoom, I had to go back to counting. Like time gets lost in this place. So I actually count. That was one of the ways I learned to shut up, by the way, in that earlier story. I learned to count a lot. Another trick, by the way, when you're learning to speak less is I had a friend who was like, 3 people have to speak before I can speak. And if 3 people don't speak, it's never my turn. So then when you create space with silence, you have to listen attentively and actively. So in active listening, the listener must fully concentrate, paying attention to body language that conveys, paying attention to their own body language, which conveys that they're concentrating. Appearance counts here. So not long ago, my colleague and I were on a Zoom call with a client, none of you people. And I remember noticing that he looked utterly disinterested. And so I Slack messaged him in the background. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I was having lazy face. And I immediately realized he was fully concentrating and listening so hard that he wasn't remembering to pay attention to body language. Right? But active listening isn't just about listening. It's also about conveying that you're listening. Right? And then the other piece is to understand that you're not just waiting to speak, but that you're seeking to understand. Right? And then this is different than empathetic listening, which I find fascinating. So unlike empathetic listening, you actually do respond when you're doing active listening. Like you verify by paraphrasing that you actually understood what was said. Right. And then you might even like take notes or strive to make sure that you remember what's being said and that everyone remembers that's being said, and you honor those words, which is sort of slightly different than reflective listening, where you just repeat back the speaker's words. Right. So you're sort of showing that level of I took it in. And active listening is could you guys hear that? Siri just woke up and asked me things. That was hilarious. Or Google, somebody. Anyway, active listening is a very specific thing in which you're really letting the speaker know that you're engaged. And what we're trying to do here as a facilitative leader is to be inclusive, to make real space for others. And I'm trying to not just make space for people who participate, but invite them into something a little more active. So that's what I'm trying to, so that's what I'm trying to do. And then the third element I'll talk about with regard to facilitative leadership is this idea of I'm the kind of person who helps others around me grow. I want to enable others through empowering language. Right. So you've created a safe space for the elephants and welcomed them in. You've centered yourself and asked a powerful question. You shut up to hear the answer. What's next? How might you empower others to solve the challenge themselves? A couple models I think about here. One is Peter Senge in the Fifth Discipline Field Book talks about levels of capacity for leadership, from the boss telling you what to do to the boss selling ideas. Side note, I really hate when people talking about wanting buy-in. I'm always like, that's not good enough. I don't just want to sell my idea. If I really want the brilliance of the people around me in this amazing system that we've put together, then at the very least, I want to consult them honestly, taking in their input, and at the best, I want to co-create. That's my goal, to kind of move up that ladder. And it's up a ladder in terms of empowerment is really the way I think about it. And then David Marquet, again, in Leadership is Language, he describes a similar dynamic in his empowerment ladder. So in his ladder, at the lowest rung, people are waiting to be told what to do. Whenever someone tells me that their people just want to be told what to do in our context of knowledge workers, I always assume they came from a system. Those people, that the ones who want to be told what to do, come from a system where they're rewarded for being told what to do and doing what they're told. But that does not mean it's what they really intrinsically want. They've been trained that way, right? But I want us to move up the ladder to where your people are telling you what they intend to do, or better yet, telling you what they did, so that you can reflect on it together and learn later, but nobody's waiting to be told, right? And that's when we can move really fast. And that's when we can make better, smarter decisions, right? So that's the goal. And actually, I'm going to go back one. I guess I can't see. It says, part of it is, it depends on the boss's capacity for leadership, but it also requires capacity for leadership among the troops. Part of what's required to enable this empowerment, in my experience, is making sure people know enough, right? Your job is not to tell them what to do, but make sure they understand the context. This is what's important. These are the priorities. This is what we're trying to accomplish. This is our why, right? If you could do that, then you can let people take some initiative. So what makes language empowering? So there's ways you can ask questions that invite thinking and speaking and confer power, and ways that don't. So I'm going to give you a minute here to consider which version of each question, A or B, invites thinking and speaking and confers power to the colleagues, to your colleagues. So you don't have to write it down, but you can write it for yourself. I'll reveal the answers in a moment. Cool. So there's your answers. Hopefully they're right. Oh yeah, they are. Empowering language creates the opening, right? It opens the space for more thinking, more words, more opinions. And the simplest step, as with powerful questions, is to avoid binaries, right? Don't ask yes or no questions. But even beyond asking open questions, the opportunity is to ask questions that don't convey that you want a particular right answer, right? It's between options A and B, right? It's that right that's the killer. You may not even know you're doing it, but what you're saying to a subordinate loud and clear is that here's the right answer. Are you sure you want to defy me by offering a third option? Right? Another language trap that removes power is the question that puts someone on the defensive. Have you thought about the needs of the client? can seem like a pretty harsh criticism, however sweetly you say it, right? Either I haven't because I didn't think of it, but now I feel shamed, or I thought I did, but obviously you can't tell, so I feel defensive, right? Neither is empowering nor generative, right? Instead, the how does version of the question, how does this consider the needs of the client, conveys benefit of the doubt and invites you to now think and respond, right? How will you test your hypothesis? Conveys so much psychological safety, safe to learn, as well as the power to own your next steps. Compare that to, how will you execute, or other versions that are all about proving you're right. What questions do you have? This one goes back to my mentor, Jean. She never failed to ask the question that way. It says, I expect, even hope that there are questions. And here's a big wide open space to bring them into. Right? The other way, any questions? Kind of says, anyone want to put their foot in to block the closing door? You have to be pretty brave to step in front of that door. Looking at these, which one of these would you perhaps like to adopt as a regular go-to question in order to confer more power in your team? And that's something you can do. Pick one, it could just be one, and write it down and keep it on a card. Keep it in your wallet. Right. It's in your little facilitator notes for the next meeting that you're going to run. Yeah. So I keep talking about this book because I'm super into it right now, but I love this quote from David Marquet. I don't often read things on a slide, but I'm going to. Your words matter more than you think. Most of us use the language we inherited from a time when workers worked with their hands and managers worked with their heads. Today, your people do much more than simply follow orders. They contribute to performance and solve problems. And it's time we updated our language to reflect that. Really powerful stuff. So I want to bring in one more element of facilitative leadership. And again, by no means is this list of practices exhaustive, but the other one I want to give is I'm the kind of person who gives myself space to react from a creative place. And this comes from that language around a creative space comes a little bit from the leadership assessment called the Leadership Circle Profile, of which I'm a huge fan and in which I've been certified. And the instrument draws on the data of thousands of leaders, and it integrates ideas from psychology, integral, spirituality, business theory, and more. It's the super holistic. They call it the universal theory of everything or something highfalutin like that. And those are the books that teach you about it. But among other things, a person's profile will show them to what extent they operate from their reactive tendencies, which are indicated in the lower half of the circle. So our reactive tendencies are the leadership styles that emphasize caution over creating results, self-protection over productive engagement, and aggression over building alignment. And those may sound like pretty negative traits, but really they simply represent our stage of development. So our reactive tendencies are the protections we put in place as children to navigate our world safely. So they work for us for part of our lives. But at some point, they become self-limiting styles that focus on things like gaining the approval of others, protecting yourself, or getting results at the expense of others, right? And so as we grow as humans and as leaders, we begin to develop our creative competencies, the upper half of the circle. And I assure you, you're already doing this. Right? These are well-researched creative competencies that measure how you achieve results, how you bring out the best in others, how you lead with vision, how you enhance your own development, how you act with integrity and courage, how you improve organizational systems. And when you act more and more from that place, you're operating from a generative, expansive energy and mindset, right? I think about when I'm freaked out by a problem or feeling defensive or backed into a corner, and I get this kind of tunnel vision, right? And I start seeing fewer options, or I suddenly worry about what people think about me. That's me operating from a reactive state, right? And contrast that to when like you're working on a hard problem, and all you see is possibility, and all you see is ways to help bring out the best in others. And it's literally a creative space, like it creates more space, right? And it's this power, it's really powerful to lead from that place. You literally have more time and energy. And it takes more time, or more energy rather, to be in those older protective states from our youth, right? It takes less energy to operate from the creative space where you're simply enabling others, right? And it really is just a development stage. Like, you outgrow sucking your thumb, you outgrow being protective, right? Or at least you more often are able to access, right? You never outgrow anything all the time. Well, except sucking your thumb, maybe. Anyway, so there's deep material on how to leverage this thinking to grow your creative competencies, and I highly recommend these books. So that's another way we can be in a facilitative leadership stance, is to work on developing our own creative states. So it can be quite daunting to consider a growth goal of become a facilitative creative leader. That might feel a little like, I need to get a university degree in facilitative leadership, or I need to change who I am all at once. Makeover, scary and hard. It can feel just as hard as quitting smoking or get in shape, right? The good news is we can use the same habits formation science that helps us get in shape to help us start an everyday practice to form new habits around the facilitative leadership behaviors. So a habit is a routine or practice performed regularly. Like it's an automatic response to a situation, an unconscious response. We start with desired identity. Right. You may notice that all these earlier, I kept saying, I'm the kind of person who. So research shows that habit formation is most successful when you claim a new identity and then surround yourself with a group that supports the new identity. So I am the type of person who empowers others. Then activities become part of that identity association. Well, what would a person who empowers others do in this situation? And there are great examples of this from negative behavior change too. Like someone who wants to stop smoking should respond to the question of, do you want a cigarette? Not with, no thanks, I'm trying to quit, where you still have the lingering identity of a smoker, but rather with something like, no thanks, I'm not a smoker. Right? Same thing. And then our brains love wins, and even more so, we love winning streaks. So if we want to create new habits, we need to create our own winning streak. But the key is to start smaller than you can possibly imagine when you hear that, even smaller. So in Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit, he talks about the desire to form a habit of flossing teeth. And he talks about starting with flossing one tooth and calling that a first small win, which probably sounds like the dumbest idea you've ever heard. And I used to laugh too, until I talked to a friend who told me she started a flossing habit by flossing that one tooth that always got food caught in it. And now she flosses all the teeth all the days, right? So another example, just using the language and thinking of a new or desired identity once is the type of small win we're talking about, right? So I want to be I'm a facilitator. I'm the kind of person who empowers others. I'm the kind of person who, waits for others to speak. Just saying it counts. You get to put it in your journal and make a check mark. So as we look to create personal and organizational habits, we're going to want to create small wins for ourselves. So just as I tried to learn yes and from Gene, we worked with a corporate leader. I worked with a corporate leader recently who was trying to become more empowering. She also chose the yes and phrasing as one of her habits. She wrote it down, and then she counted how often she used it. And she also counted how often she failed to use it, but noticed right away, because that was a win, just noticing, right? And then she went further to even ask her team to let her know how she was doing. So another book I like, James Clear, Atomic Habits. He talks about habit formation in terms of these 4 laws of habit change. So law number 1 is make it obvious. You want to start running, put your running shoes where you can see them. Even better, connect the new habit to a habit you already have, calls that habit stacking, and create a cue out of something you already do. So as soon as I start my video for this Zoom meeting, I'm going to ask everyone to do a personal check-in. I'm trying to improve social caring among my team, right? I might make that attractive by putting a fun check-in box in Miro. So now it's not all on me, and now it's easier, right? So Miro, like whatever online thing you're using, right? So I think about an executive I worked with a few years ago, and he wanted to move away from his command and control style to invite his team to lean in. And so he wrote a few questions with empowering language on an index card, which he kept in his shirt pocket. And at the weekly staff meeting, he tried to ask at least one of the questions on the card, just one, right? And by the way, it counts as a win that he even put it on a card and in his shirt, right? He reported his results to me in our one-on-one. The make it satisfying part came when I praised his efforts. Although, of course, the real satisfaction came when his team started bringing more ideas to the table, right? But you need the sooner one too. Right. So having someone that you can tell and brag to who says, good job, right? That helps. So what new habit can you, what new habit do you want to build? So I've brought this list back up. We only talked about some of them. Take a moment to think about what one facilitative leadership behavior you might want to work on. And if you're feeling really brave, you could even throw it in the chat. Nice. Yeah. I love it. The silence is a big one. Powerful questions, power of silence. Yes. Welcoming elephants. I'll never forget the time our top leader at Rally literally opened a quarterly planning meeting with like 120 people in the room and literally put something in the center of the room to represent the elephant and named it. It was fantastic. Cool. Oh, positive intent. Yay. I love it. Cool. Why is this not? Okay. So now that you have a sense of what you want to work on, the next step is to write it down. Now I made you write it here, but write it for yourself. Start habit tracking and recruit an accountability buddy. So write it down very specifically. What is the identity you're striving for? I am the kind of person who makes space for others to speak first, or I'm the kind of person who empowers others. I'm the kind of person who's inclusive. And then write down what are going to be your first small wins. Nope, even smaller. Maybe you're going to count to 7 after you ask a question at Tuesday's Scrum of Scrums. That specific. When you've done that 3 weeks in a row, maybe you can add another setting in which you will count to 7 after asking a question, right? I mean, it's that small. And then ideally your accountability buddy is somebody who's doing it with you. Or who can observe you, right? So you're going to share your plan with that person. They're going to share theirs. You're going to ask them to observe you on Tuesday. And after the meeting, you're going to ask for feedback, and you're going to ask them to give you gifts, opportunities to improve, and grades, things you did well, right? And I remember doing that when I was trying to learn to make a space for other people. I had a peer colleague, the one who told me I was a jerk. Being a jerk. Sorry, she did not say I was a jerk. She said I was being a jerk. She was a very good friend of mine. And so I enlisted her to help me notice when I was being a jerk and when I was acting better. And when I wasn't, it was hard. It was hard. It was surprising how hard it was for me to notice sometimes, right? Because even though I was trying, I was, mired in the passion of whatever, right? So I was very diligent about getting her feedback. And then the last key is to track your results. So where are you going to record your wins, your gifts, your grades, your goals, and your misses? Right. I'm using my work notebook for work stuff, and I'm my personal journal for personal habits that I'm working on. So I use this stuff all the time. Cool. So again, I'm inviting you to become a more facilitative leader to accelerate lean agile change and lean agile culture by consciously modeling a more facilitative leadership style in words and actions every day. Assume an identity, use the power of intention, daily practice, and habit formation to make that identity a reality. And not only does this help create a sustaining lean agile culture with better business outcomes and happier humans, but it gives you personally more time in a creative state versus a reactive state. And your employees, your coworkers are going to be happy and more engaged, and so will you. So now, picture yourself in that cape. Say to yourself, I am the kind of person who mentors my team to become better stewards of the system, better deliverers of value to our customers, who lean in to own our outcomes, and who individually bring their voice and their talent to help us be awesome. The end. Thank you. There's my contact information, which you are welcome to use. And I will indeed make a PDF of the slides and send them out tomorrow to the peoples. Thank you.
Do we have time for a question or two, Ronica?
Sure.
Okay. Well, let's open it up. Any questions? I know that was a lot to consume. There's a lot of good information there.
I know it's an intense one.
This would probably help. But I have been running into an issue with retrospectives for one of my teams where I'm just really getting complete silence from people. And in the COVID world, we're not all in the office, so it's been extra hard with, doing it online. I've been trying to introduce some games or something to try to liven people up before we actually go into the retro aspect of things. And that's helped a little bit, but I mean, I've been trying the power of silence, and I've been trying to do more open-ended questions. And I think I still have some work as a facilitator, but also if you have any suggestions for opening people up a little bit more.
One of the things that came to mind when you said that is I've been really aware lately of some people, that quiet thinker, they opened with that story about, Gene's the quiet thinker and wants more space. And so one version of that is give people a chance to write an answer to whatever your prompt is first, and write privately, write it on a piece of paper in front of them, give them plenty of time to think. And then you jumpstart the conversation by letting them read the paper, which is less scary, right? They've already done the thinking part. They're not trying to be brilliant on the fly, that kind of thing. So I've done that a lot, and that helps a ton. What I've been learning lately is, and maybe it's because I'm often springing even bigger, hard questions on people, is sending questions out in advance, or thinking prompts in advance. So, hey, I don't know, the theme of the retrospective is not just how did the sprint go, but we're going to specifically focus on, I don't know, quality or whatever. Hey, do some thinking. Here's some data I've got. Look at this, bring 3 ideas, not for solutions, but for what the problem might be, right? Or something like that, right? And give people a whole day. I used to think of as a facilitator that I had to surprise people with my brilliance. And that would create energy somehow. And I slowly realized I'm just making people uncomfortable.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, thank you. I think that would probably help a lot to send some ideas to get the juices flowing ahead of time.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Thank
That was a
you.
great question. Who else has a question?
Hi, I have a question.
Cool.
So I am a secretary at a church, and at work, I am a supervisor / manager. So I have people that I supervise, a team of people that I supervise, and I've held meetings, and, and after the meetings, I always do, sort of like look at how the meeting flowed, and, and then plan on how to have more engagement or whatever. Okay, so whenever the pastors have a church meeting, they seem to not have a flow of the complete objective of the meeting. And I don't know
Right.
if this goes, but, and I sit there, and I'm no way have I arrived to what this was about, but I sit there and I'm like, I want to, sort of like take over, because
Sure. I just lost her video. I just lost her audio. All of a sudden, I may have caused that. Sorry. I just broke all the rules I talked about by jumping in. Just I'm still human. It's great. But I will. So one of my favorite, guerrilla facilitation. One of my favorite things Gene always talked about was how to be a guerrilla facilitator. And that story I told in the beginning. Oh, do you
okay,
have your audio back? There you go.
there, yes. I don't know
Oh.
what's the last thing you heard, but go ahead.
Well, yeah. So I think the opportunity is guerrilla facilitation. I'm sure that the pastors know way more about the Bible than they ever have, and we're never taught anything about facilitation, right? The hard thing is to do it gently, right? But hey, and you could do it in the moment, or you can do it in between. Kind of be like, hey, I facilitate meetings for a living. I would love to help you achieve the goals of your meeting easier, faster, better, whatever. But also guerrilla facilitation. Whenever Gene would get up and be like, can I just check in on the purpose, or maybe not the purpose of the whole meeting, but you could be like, can I just check in on this? What are we trying to accomplish in this section? I want to make sure I'm contributing effectively, right? So you don't, you have to find that blameless language and make it for yourself. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's not like, hey, I have no idea what you're doing here, but it's sort of like, I'm not sure I know the best way to contribute in this moment. Maybe others are as confused as I am. Can you just sort of clarify what we're trying to accomplish? Right.
Okay.
That kind of thing. So you definitely have to ask permission a little bit, but think of it
Yeah.
as, and it's about coming from a place of, I would like to offer you a service.
Okay.
As opposed to you're doing it wrong.
Okay. That's good. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right. Well, Ronica, I know you got to go. We got to go. Why don't we start wrapping up? So we'll get the slides from Ronica, and as I mentioned in the chat, we'll post them on our website, so they'll be available. You do have a survey on tonight's event. We hope you found it valuable. And there is a survey in your inbox, so please take an opportunity. Or Dave, I guess they have to point their phone at the thing here, and they can do the survey.
Either way, click the link in your email, snap a pic really quick before you leave, whatever you like.
That'll work. So again, we sincerely wanted to thank Ronica for joining us, and look for the email about the October meeting, and we hope to see you all again real soon. So with that, we'll say good night. Thanks for joining us.
Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
This is great.
Thank you.
Good night. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.